समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
10 weeks ago, when India and Pakistan clashed during Operation Sindoor, the lethality and reach of unarmed aerial vehicles or UAVs, which we'd all seen in distant battlefields, came home for Indians. The defense establishment has been talking about it ever since. Last week, Chief of Defense Staff General Anil Chauhan said recent global conflicts have demonstrated how UAVs can, I quote, shift the tactical balance disproportionately. He underlined the need for India to be self-reliant in UAVs as well as for weapon systems to defend against them. The general's right. UAVs played a key role not just in the recent India-Pakistan conflict, but have been at the cutting edge of the war in Ukraine. We've all seen footage of first-person view or FPV drones, the kinds designed for amateur photography and aerobatics, literally hunting down soldiers in their foxholes and bunkers. We've seen larger drones launch precision munitions which kill terrorists like Ayman al-Zawahiri in his Kabul apartment or hit top Iranian officials in their homes. Yet, there's a more complex story to be told too, which I'll be looking at in this episode of The Print Explorer. Late one afternoon, in a lunchtime speech to the Association of the US Army, a powerful lobbying group, General William Westmoreland, America's Army chief and former commander in Vietnam, spelled out his vision of future wars. On the battlefield of the future, he said, enemy forces will be located, tracked, and targeted almost instantaneously through the use of data links, computer-assisted intelligence evaluation, and automated fire control. With first-round kill probabilities approaching certainty, and with surveillance devices that can continually track the enemy, the need for large forces to fix the opposition will be less important. That speech could be given by any general today, but the year was actually 1969, a year of world historical significance. Apollo 11 had just landed on the moon, the then Woodstock Music Festival took place for the first time, and the Stonewall riots put gay rights on the global agenda. And of course, I was born. A few less happy things were taking place too. American forces in Vietnam had peaked at 543,000, imposing unsustainable political costs at home, where conscription had become deeply unpopular. And what General Westmoreland didn't say over lunch that day was that the new kind of warfare he was talking about already existed. Two IBM 360-65 mainframe computers, the very fastest and most powerful in existence at that time, had been installed in a secret building in Thailand's Nakhon Phanom, receiving a constant flow of digital signals from sensors planted along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the North Vietnamese logistics line that ran north to south along the borders of Cambodia and Laos. As it turned out, Igloo White, as General Westmoreland's operation was codenamed, was a spectacular failure. There was simply too long a time lag between a sensor tripping and airstrikes. The North Vietnamese also very quickly realized how these sensors worked and developed methods to trick them. They played truck ignition recordings, for example, and planted buckets of urine. $5 billion and 5 years later, the project folded up. Today, there's a far bigger story unfolding involving much more than just drones. Militaries across the world, including India, are increasingly investing in autonomous combat vehicles, which work on air, sea, and land without human supervision. Think of robotic mules or dogs which can carry payloads for infantry, or platforms which can conduct suicide missions, extreme endurance submarine platforms that can navigate their own course and hunt for targets, and even combat aircraft that can slip in and out of outer space. All these will be networked with layers of sensors which gather information deep beneath the seas and in space, communicating seamlessly with each other. The battlefield of the future will be as networked as never before. The question is this actually a revolution in the way wars are fought, or just a technological evolution in the means available to militaries? And what implications will it have for the battlefields of the future? The judge at the Aero Club of France cried out in amazement, "Mais c'est nuit, but that's unheard of." And so it was. Lawrence Sperry and his assistant Emile Cachin each stood on one wing of their Curtiss flying boat as it flew itself through the skies on the 18th of June 1914. Together with his father Elmer, Lawrence had developed an automatic gyro stabilizer which allowed aircraft to maintain straight and level flight without human intervention. This feat won Sperry a prize of $10,000 and a place in aviation history. The UAV was born that day. Sort of. For many years before the Sperry invention, technologists had been considering the implications of radio control for military devices. In 1898, the great inventor Nikola Tesla, the guy after whom Tesla cars are named, had demonstrated a 4-foot model torpedo, which he guided straight and could turn using a simple system of switches. War will cease to be possible, Tesla optimistically prophesied, when all the world knows that the most feeble of nations can supply itself with a weapon which renders its coast secure and its ports impregnable to the assault of even the united armadas of the world. The engineer, inventor, and television pioneer Archibald Lowe, considered so dangerous by German intelligence that they tried to assassinate him twice, once using a poisoned cigarette, took the development of the UAV forward. The First World War had seen the rival armies, the Germans on one side and the French and the British on the other, stalemated in a hellscape of trenches, each side losing hundreds and thousands of men in pointless efforts to break through lines defended by machine guns and artillery. Lowe's solution was a monoplane made from bits of tin, planks of wood, and an engine and wings scrounged from another aircraft. Loaded with explosives, this UAV, codenamed the aerial target to confuse German intelligence, was meant to crash into submarines, Zeppelin bombers, and hardened positions in trenches. Across the Atlantic Ocean in America, the inventor Charles Kettering had developed a very similar device, using gyros to maintain the stability of the aircraft and a barometer which sent signals to small flight controls that were moved by a system of cranks and a bellows for altitude control. The bellows, by the way, were taken from an automatic piano. There were some not insignificant problems facing this new technology though. Man, it wasn't just that the first test flights of both these aircraft ended in crashes. French engineers had, by the end of the First World War, sorted out many of the technological issues and even succeeded in building a voice-in biplane that flew itself for almost an hour. The most tricky parts of flight, that is the takeoff and landing, were also solved in 1923 when the engineer Maurice Percheron and pilot Captain Max Boucher designed, built and remotely piloted a voice-in Type 10 biplane. Few in the military establishment though, and rightly, saw much use for an aircraft that could only fly low and straight. And then there was the problem of radio interference. From the 1930s though, the British Navy found some use for the technology. It adapted a de Havilland Tiger Moth trainer fitted with radio control gear that included pneumatically operated servo units linked to the elevator control and rudder to train anti-aircraft gunners. The British, at the peak of their power before the Second World War, refused to share this technology with even their transatlantic allies. That's how prized it was. The Americans, though, developed their own version, a Curtiss N2C fledgling controlled by pilots in other airplanes. In 1939, one squadron was deployed for the Navy on the west coast, and 2 years later, another squadron on the east. The Royal Air Force pilot turned Hollywood star Reginald Denny, don't take my word for it, look him up on YouTube, developed an even more sophisticated version, designated the radio plane QQ-3. Almost 10,000 of these were built. Later in the Second World War, the United States modified Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses and consolidated B-24s into remotely operated flying bombs by filling them with 20,000 pounds of explosives each and then flying them into heavily defended or very hard targets such as Germany's U-boat pens and long-range missile sites. The United States Navy built its own equivalent, the TDR-1, which was a large, modern-looking, twin-engine wood and metal unpiloted aircraft capable of carrying a 2,000-pound bomb or torpedo and hitting a target 425 miles away. It was controlled from a Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber flying nearby. The results weren't, to be fair, particularly impressive, but the technology was marching forward. Aircraft weren't the only sphere of rapid technological development. The first mass-produced weapon system with autonomous functionalities was an airdropped passive acoustic homing torpedo designated the Mk-24 and fondly called Fido. Fido made its combat debut in May 1943 and used hydroplanes arrayed around the midsection of the torpedo to listen for, locate, track and home in on German U-boats attacking Allied transatlantic shipping. When the United States tested nuclear weapons at Bikini Atoll in 1946, newsreels showed a fighter plane in the sky. The public, though, weren't told that the aircraft didn't have a pilot. Grumman Hellcats and B-17s had been converted into remote-controlled drones by that point, equipped with air scoops, collection bags and recording instruments to measure the radioactivity inside the mushroom cloud of the nuclear detonation. The Cold War saw UAV technology continue to develop very rapidly. The Gyrodyne QH-50 was the first drone helicopter put into operation and the first to be equipped with weapons. From 1964, the United States Air Force began flying the AQM-34 Ryan Firebee on reconnaissance missions over Vietnam, even coating them with radar-evading paint like modern stealth aircraft. Between 1964 and 1975, some 1,000 AQM-34s were built, which were launched and controlled from Lockheed DC-130s. They flew more than 34,000 operational surveillance missions over Southeast Asia. Long before modern drones with meter-scale precision munitions began to loiter over battlefields in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen, and long before the war in Ukraine, the foundations were thus being laid for autonomous weapon systems. Weapons that could make their own decisions on when and who to kill. Following the end of the Second World War, the nuclear threat to the United States propelled the development of these autonomous systems. From the mid-1950s, the Semi-Round Environment or SAGE was created to direct and control United States continental air defense against Soviet missile threats. SAGE could take inputs from a variety of radar sensors dotted around the periphery of the continental United States and autonomously generate tracks of reported targets. These tracks would be highlighted to human operators who could then direct any air defense in range of an intercept. Later, SAGE was developed further to directly provide the information to interceptor aircraft. As computers became smaller, and especially after digital microprocessors appeared, combat control systems of all types, aircraft, ships, ground combat vehicles, and artillery and missile fire control systems, all proliferated. The scholar Robert Work is among those who's developed the development of these increasingly sophisticated systems. The AIM-9 heat-seeking infrared guided air-to-air missile debuted in combat in 1968. Laser-guided weapons were first used operationally in the Vietnam War, and GPS-guided missiles and bombs during America's first Iraq War. The CBU-105 wind-corrected munition dispenser was designed to release 40 small bomblets called skeets, each capable of independently selecting and engaging an armored vehicle using a combination of laser and infrared sensors. The munition was employed to devastating effect in the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the one that followed 9/11. As human operators were involved in these systems, the United States military classified them as semi-autonomous. Fully autonomous systems were, however, available as early as 1979. That year saw the fielding of Captor, or the encapsulated torpedo, a deep water mine. The mine had its own upward looking sonar system that was designed to ignore surface ships and listen out only for submarines. In the event of war, when Captor detected a Soviet submarine, it would release its torpedo, which would then home in on the sub and sink it. In other words, once Captor mines were emplaced and activated, the weapon system could detect, classify, and attack its own target without any further human oversight. The Tomahawk anti-ship missile and the low-cost autonomous attack system, or LOCAS, were designed similarly to locate and attack any targets meeting program criteria in a designated area. The radar-guided TASM, fielded in the early 1980s, was meant to be fired at an enemy ship on a generated target bearing with an estimated range to target. At the end of that flyout, if it did not detect a target, TASM would begin a radar search pattern to cover the area of uncertainty where its target might have gone. LOCAS was meant to target ballistic missile launchers. The two systems were successfully tested but are not known to have been actually deployed. Finally, the United States integrated autonomous decision making in missile systems that became available in the 1980s, like the Patriot air and missile defense system and the naval Aegis combat system, which we've seen in action recently protecting Israel from Iranian attacks. Although capable of supervised autonomous operations in case operators are overwhelmed in a massive attack, the systems can also quickly revert to human control if required. The lessons from this little-known history are several. First, it's clear that simply the production of more UAVs or counter UAVs, though that's important, isn't enough. The development of autonomous combat systems will undergo tremendous development in coming years, driven by enhancements in computing capability and artificial intelligence. There will be developments too in defensive countermeasures. The real challenge will be to make sure India is able to develop cutting-edge technologies in a range of spheres, from sensors to communications and computing, and bring those all together with platforms like UAVs. India's defense industry has already made some important steps forward in developing autonomous systems. Two of those reported are the countermeasure dispensing system and the adaptive intelligent front towing system. Autonomous weapon systems also play an important role in surveillance and reconnaissance along India's borders and will likely develop rapidly in the future. A major challenge, though, will be to maintain control of the battle spaces of the future. Autonomous weapon systems, unlike humans, will not make errors because of tension or fear. As experience from Libya, Ukraine, and Israel makes clear, though, the judgments made by algorithms can be just as catastrophically wrong as those made by humans. There are also concerns, scholars Charukeshi Bhatt and Tejas Bharadwaj note, that autonomous systems, because of their very nature, could drive inadvertent escalations of conflict, where careful human reflection and experience might have made other choices. What is clear from Ukraine, most important, is that the battlefields of the future won't be as different from those we know optimists once imagined. Nikola Tesla's view of wars being made redundant has turned out to be simply untrue. General Westmoreland's hope that large forces would not be needed because of the widespread use of technology has also been proved wrong. Advancing technology instead coexists with the large-scale killing of combatants, And in Ukraine, we're seeing trench warfare that's almost reminiscent of the First World War. Technology, thus, must not lead us to trivialize the very real costs and human consequence that warfare will continue to have, no matter the tech with which it is fought. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to The Print. Thank you for watching this episode of The Print Explorer.